when I think we're probably good to get started. I am just admitting people as they come in,
Great.
but I think it might be good to just get going.
Sure. I can start us off and then you can do a land acknowledgement for us. I'm in traditional territory 4 from my home, and learning more and more about the land that I'm on here through COVID times. Catherine and I are really thrilled to be facilitating on behalf of LSF today, and we're focused on kindergarten and the early years, and both of us don't have all the answers, but we have some ideas, and we'd love to create some space here so that you feel supported, so that you feel like you have a couple tips and tricks in your back pocket starting a really, really unprecedented back to school. We know there's lots of anxiety. We know that our kids have that same level of anxiety, and we'd like to just create a space that is compassionate and gentle and can help you feel supported in going back. And we'd like the outdoors to be part of that. So Catherine, if you can share the land acknowledgement, we can start in a good way.
So absolutely. And, I would just like to say that in terms of my own practice, I always like to spend time co-creating a land acknowledgement with my students. This particular one comes from York University and the City of Toronto. It's a blend of two. So we recognize that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which LSF works. LSF and York acknowledge their presence on the traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Toronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and the Métis. It is now home to many Indigenous peoples. We acknowledge that the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with the One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the Great Lakes region. Toronto is built on sacred land that is part of an agreement between Indigenous peoples and then extended to allied nations to peacefully and respectfully care for it. By personally making a land acknowledgement, we are taking part in an act of reconciliation, honoring the land and Indigenous heritage, which dates back over 10,000 years.
Thanks, Catherine. That's lovely. And we had a great conversation. So Catherine and I, we should say, have never facilitated before, nor have we ever met in person before. And what a joy it's been to have conversations with you. And one of the conversations we had was, how do we lift land acknowledgement off the page? How do we bring it to life? How do we make it an active process and not a passive one? And so you, with our earliest learners, just inviting you to think about that. We had a really, really rich example of that last year, where we had actually a whole secondary school who were in the process of doing an inquiry on birds, all multidisciplinary. There was hundreds of students involved, and 2 students took it upon themselves to co-write a land acknowledgement from the perspective of the birds. I'd be happy to share that out. I think we're not going to read it today, but if you'd like me to share it, I can include it in the slide deck, and you can take a read. But please, I would ask if you could give credit to those 2 students. Grade 11 and grade 12 students will be named there, and as well as their school. But just take that into account, what that might look like for your youngest learners as well.
So this is
me? Oh, this is me.
This is your Tanya.
Sorry.
That's okay.
So we've done our land acknowledgement, but we will continue to do our land acknowledgement as we kind of bring it to life. I think all of this is land acknowledgement if we are going outside and developing a relationship with the land. We'll introduce ourselves and give some protocols around how we operate in this virtual space. We're going to talk about moving the learning outdoors and outdoor learning and what the difference is. And we'll even add on a piece to that, what leading outdoors looks like. We'll talk about 3 L's, and one is the learner, us included. The second is the land, and then the third is less is more, especially when we start in September with all these other things floating around in our head. We're going to do some collaborative rethinking and revisioning in terms of some traditional indoor activities we might be doing in the FDK program using a tool called Jamboard. Hopefully some of you have used it before, and if not, it's just something new that you can explore. We'll hopefully have a good chunk of time at the end to actually engage in knowledge building online, a virtual discussion. So please, if you have a notepad beside you, or just you're good at remembering things in your head, make note of things that are really standing out for you, and especially the things that would be valuable to build knowledge around using this group, this coast-to-coast group, knowing that maybe specific things we might not be able to address, that's specific to our regions, but what are things that we can really collaborate on and engage idea improvement. Did I miss anything? And then of course, the last is just giving you some helpful resources and reflecting. We have a really cool tool, Flipgrid, that Catherine has set up for us, that if you're brave, you can provide us with a little bit of a video feedback, and maybe you can use that with your students, that tool. So we're in for a great ride. We thought it'd be, oh, sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
I was just going to say, Tanya, just to add on, or I know in the other sessions, the question about, is the slideshow going to be shared?
Right.
And is there lots of resources that we can just take straight to our classroom? And there's lots in the slideshow. There's things that are linked. And yes, the slideshow is going to be shared. So don't panic. We got you covered. Lots of good resources coming down the pipes.
Absolutely. Okay, we thought it'd be fun to introduce each other because we don't know each other very well. So Catherine, you're up.
Oh, it's me. I get to introduce Tanya?
Yeah.
Okay. It's really funny because Tanya's Bitmoji actually looks so much like mine. So when she shared it with me today, I'm like, wait a second. and we've had a few really lovely conversations. We're from different school boards. We were thrust together by LSF to do this kindergarten together, and it's been really amazing. So Tanya is a very seasoned outdoor educator with York Region District School Board, and is currently in a consultant role. You're the outdoor education and environmental education consultant for York Region. Are you the only one, Tanya?
Actually, I have been the only one until this year, and we're hiring a second consultant to support the work because we're building capacity. So we're pretty excited about that. Yeah.
And I mean, Tanya is very clearly outdoors in nature with her family frequently, because last night she had to jet off to be a part of a go paddle, teaching kids to paddle and canoeing webinar. I don't know how many webinars she's had in the last 3 days. I want to say it's at least 10. So if she's webinared out, then we'll just do our best to kind of make the best of things. But Tanya is definitely an amazing resource, and her links are in the slideshow. So if you have questions, you can reach out to either of us. I'm currently, we'll get to me later, but Tanya is definitely board level resource person with lots of great, you have a question, she's got a resource in her back pocket. So I think, did I get everything?
That's great, Catherine. That's lovely. That was really lovely. Thank you. And the Catherine beside me here, who has the same emoji, has also done a number of webinars. And so if you've been on maybe multiple webinars that we've been there too, I hope that there isn't a repeat message here. But Catherine is currently a grade 7 teacher, I've learned, in the Peel District School Board. And I think I sense from just knowing her for not a very long time, is a real leader in her board, trying to productively, I call it productive disruption, productively disrupt and really bring about really positive change that impacts students by connecting them to nature and their spaces. And in turn, we know if we have a relationship with something, I can tell from Catherine that we're going to protect it. And so anyone who gets to work with her is very lucky. She also brings experience. If you're wondering why she's running a kindergarten webinar, she brings experience at another school, 5 years experience facilitating kindergarten programming in it, sort of centered around nature connection, play-based, inquiry-based programs. She has a Reggio background. She's currently doing some exciting work in her Masters of Ed around sustainability, creativity, and innovation, which I really want to talk to her a little bit more about. Apparently she loves gardening, so you can ask her about that. I don't know what Taiko is, Catherine. I would really like to know, but she's a taiko player, and she's really interested in reducing the impact in our schools. So really pleased to facilitate with you, Catherine, and get to know you and really get to know everybody else in the room, because the knowledge is in the room.
And even though our space is virtual, we're just going to remind folks about the norms of collaboration. So the idea here is that we are not necessarily experts, and because none of us have taught in a pandemic before. And so we're all coming at this as a, you know, as a collective to try and build some strategies together, some knowledge together. So a good portion of our session today will be working together and collaborating on that. So just in terms of the norms, just remembering spirit of inquiry, presuming positive intentions, trying to build, we're not necessarily having to analyze to death everything, but, you know, to look for idea diversity, paying attention to how you're feeling, and asking lots of questions. So the chat, I am trying to monitor the chat. Oh my goodness, there's more people waiting. Okay, so I am trying to monitor the chat to get, and so we'll try to get to your questions. So if you just have a spur of the moment question, absolutely feel free. So your video participation through different points of our presentation is totally optional. If you have limited video or audio, you can absolutely just join in through the chat. If you'd like to share a video with video or audio, you're absolutely welcome to. But just keeping muted unless there's a question happening. And if you do need to step away for a body break, absolutely go for it. Okay, so unfortunately my mentee quiz didn't work from the first session, so I'm nervous to try it again. I think we're just going to leave it because it took too much time, and we're time limited today. So maybe just in the chat, or if you feel like you'd like to share it into the conversation, you can unmute yourself. Like, I think some of you started to share who you are and where you're from, but maybe you could share with us a fun childhood nature memory or some kind of outdoor interest that you had as a kid that might be kind of fun or interesting that you think that you could share with us. And yeah. In the last session, we asked, someone was talking about fishing, and I had to say, well, one of my interesting childhood memories was growing up on a campground. We owned a campground, and the smell of fish now I still have a really hard time with, because the scales and the fish guts were all collected in a spot, and I was responsible for cleaning that. So I still have a bit of a hard time with the smell, but oh, nice. Making forts, playing the hayloft at the barn. Kendall, that was actually going to be one of my other ones as well.
Yeah, that's nice. I was on a call this morning with Child and Nature Alliance Canada, and someone was sharing that they ran some programs over the summer and how healing it was to see young children come back to these programs. And they had to put in some really, you know, COVID measures through the summer, but how beautiful it was to see them reconnect to that kind of play outside, and how healing it was, especially after some of them being at home for many, many months, not leaving their houses. It was really, they said, quite healing for adults and the kids involved. Cool. There's a lot of people from like couple different provinces, which is great.
That's wonderful.
And sorry, I was just going to say, in light of that, keep in mind that both Catherine and I are coming from an Ontario context. If that isn't your context, we're going to try and talk in broad terms, but if we give an example that might not apply to you, please always check with your local health authority and your local school board.
All right, so
cool.
Let's move on.
So I think based on your responses, we all know why taking kids outside is great. But I think that what we need to realize is, especially, it was great to take kids outside pre-COVID. Now it's almost like crucial for our mental health and well-being. We know that two major risk factors are ventilation and social distancing, and taking kids outside, if we just talk about the logistics of that, creates a safer environment. So that's a fantastic reason, which is why we're seeing a lot of demand for the support of outdoor learning right now. So much so that people are having to manage their schoolyard spaces in a way that they never have before. And then we know we have that vitamin D and vitamin N piece that is essential. And if you're not sure, you've heard about the vitamin D, but you haven't heard about the vitamin N, that stands for vitamin nature. So the air, the sunlight, the contact with soil. We talk about things and we read about things like forest bathing and the sounds of nature, and how even people that can see nature from their windows are in a better state of mind and better health than people who don't see nature. And then the value for our 21st century learners and the skills that they can build around sustainability and looking after our planet. So if that's not enough reasons, that's quite a few, but if that's not enough, we have a short little video for you from Sir Ken Robinson, who has been on my heart for some time. And then he's just recently passed, and I was devastated. I don't know if others have followed his work, but he has one of the most popular TED Talks out there. And then he created this short little video about why to take kids outside. So, you know what, it might be like a seed that if you're wanting to be inspired prior to going back in September, take a look at this. And just, I think, in memory of Sir Ken and all the stuff that he's done to advocate for creativity and student engagement, you know, the more the heart, hand, head approach to learning versus just the head, I think it would be a great start. So I think that's okay. And we can all just say we are committing right now to creating a learning environment that inspires joy, awe, and wonder. And I hope that we create a space for exhale for our students. That's kind of the message that he brings.
Okay. Okay, so as we said, we are an Ontario teacher, so this is from the Ontario Kindergarten Program document. So we don't actually talk about it as being a curriculum, we talk about it as being a program. And this quote I thought was really, this is speaking to nature-based learning in sort of a specific term. So the idea that children's curiosity and sense of wonder is magnified by being outdoors. The fact that, you know, the thinking and the learning and the leadership and the innovation that comes from being in these natural settings is quite different from what they would be experiencing in their indoor environments. And, you know, as Tanya mentioned, some of our students, some of our little ones haven't been outside enough. Over the last few months, they've really been indoors. So really bumping that natural, that outdoor time for them is going to be really, I think, mission critical. And sometimes we see successes for students that we don't anticipate seeing successes when they're in those outdoor. The way they interact outdoors and the success they have, and they feel that success differently outdoors than they do sometimes indoors. So in Ontario, outdoor learning is an expected part of our day. And, you know, the idea that, you know, we are working with our team and with our partners and with our families and with our students in particular to be really engaged in those outside of those real world, outside of the four walls of a building experiences is, I think, incredibly powerful, and it's enshrined in the document. So, you know, it's lovely that they've done that, and we all just are on a journey to sort of to build our ability and our comfort level in our own as adults in that situation.
Thanks,
Okay.
Catherine.
Yeah.
So for this one, I'd love people just to imagine you're heading back in September and you've got paths in front of you. You've got a path that you can take where you're going to take your program that you typically do and you're going to take it outside. So maybe it's reading and you're going to take your reading under a tree. Then you have another path to choose, and that's sort of the outdoor learning path. Instead of learning outdoors, you're now going to use nature as your pedagogical tool. So you're going to maybe bring in seasonality, you're going to bring in cycles, you're going to bring in your environment as teacher. And then your third path is you're going to lead outdoors. So you're going to be a mentor at your school. You plan to be that person who's going to create that schoolyard map and really bring people together to use the outdoors and harness the outdoors as a strategy and a tool. So just take a moment in the chat and think about which path you might be on, because all paths are going to be super important in terms of how you might be considering taking the learning outdoors. I think that it's totally fine if you're at the beginning of that journey. And as you progress, you can realize that there's a continuum and there's lots of resources to help you, but that this whole idea of dream big but start small is really important for September. So it's better to start small and just go outside and read than it is to not go out. So take a moment, just write in the chat, where are you at? Are you going to be doing learning in the outdoors? Are you going to be doing outdoor learning where you're using nature as your pedagogical tool? Or are you going to be in a position where you're leading learning outdoors? And as you fill in the chat, I think it's really important to know that when we progress in that sort of that continuum or that roadmap, and we're going down the path of leading outdoors, we're creating those mentorship opportunities where we know we're developing real sustainable practices, where if students have a mentor that cares for the environment and loves the environment. I think we're getting feedback. Is there anybody who's not muted?
I just got it. It was Neela.
Oh.
She just joined and she so I've muted her. Sorry,
That's
Neela.
Okay. That's okay. So everyone's filling in. Some people are hoping to be leading. Some people are learning in the outdoors. Some people are outdoor learning. That's fantastic to just get a pulse on what path you might be on. We'd love to hear from you. If you are someone who has things to share with us, that would be fantastic. I think LSF would be open to you if you're in a position of leading outdoors and you have some tips and tricks. And even if you're at the sort of that beginning path and you have some suggestions that helped you on that path, that would be great. Is there anything that you want to add to that, Catherine?
I just wanted to say, you know, the nice thing is, because I just came from the intermediate level chat, I was in that one earlier, and you know, kindergarten teachers, we are actually, and kindergarten educators are really well positioned for this transition from learning in the outdoors into outdoor learning, because for most kindergarten educators and kindergarten teams, you know, that there's already an outdoor play piece and there's a certain level of comfort with and a routine of being outdoors. So this is actually like this group of people, we're actually prime position to make that jump into the outdoor learning piece and using nature as a pedagogical tool. It's just figuring out little pathways, little doors to open. So it's really exciting actually, and this is the best year to do it. Really it is. And there's so many opportunities to really transform the way we teach this year in positive ways. Yeah, and yeah, that's exactly right. Okay, so I think that's it for this one.
Yeah, you can start us off on the next slide and then I can chime in if you want.
Sure. So and you know, in the chat, if you don't mind, because we kind of skipped over the Menti, and one of the parts of the Menti was to sort of address some of the areas of concern that and anxieties or places of worry or you know organizational hurdles that you might be feeling are standing in the way of making the jump. So if you could take a minute to throw that into the group chat, we will be using those later on in our knowledge building circle. But you know, there are some really, the beautiful thing is that the environment as the third teacher, for a lot of kindergarten educators, this is not an unfamiliar term. If it is unfamiliar, it comes from Regio-inspired practices, where the idea of, what was it, Tanya? There's the, where did our little diagram go?
Are we talking about environment as third teacher?
Yeah.
So space, time, and materials. Do I have that
yes.
right? FDK Pro Stars out there?
Yes.
I'm okay with getting it wrong. That's just coming.
So the idea of the space and the time and the materials being, you know, whether it's indoors or outdoors, we can find learning opportunities in everything that we're doing with, and wherever we are, we're finding learning in those moments with students. Are you familiar with where you're going? So, you know, it's funny because my intermediate colleagues, they don't often go out for community walks. So, but they do often use GPS and Google Maps. So, you know, I brought out, you know, one of the things we're using right now is we're using a Google Map image to try and map out some of the things in our schoolyard where, in our community, that are available and accessible to us. So, you know, we're in a suburban area. We have a very built environment around us. My colleagues that presented in the last workshop are out in a rural area with very few built structures in their context. But, you know, becoming more familiar with the space around you, I think, is really important to think about. Did you want to jump in on this part now? Do you want to take over?
Sure, I just put something in the chat to invite people in. If you have engaged in outdoor learning already and you have some routines that you want to put in the chat, that would be great too. But definitely having some of those routines in place as you would have routines indoors in your classroom would be a great idea. And some of the conversations we've been having in our school board and some of the webinars I've been part of was using this idea of a flock of birds. So how might we move as a flock of birds when we're outside? Birds have social distancing built in because they need that wingspan. And we even had some debate around what is the wingspan of a goose. And we've established that we want wingspans between a goose and an eagle, which is pretty cool. So you can build in some math in there. You can talk about different wingspans, maybe even an art activity, or you could use some rope to show that difference. And then engage in that routine of how might we travel as a flock, because a flock really is a strength in numbers thing. They encourage each other. They honk from behind, they take turns leading. There's a beautiful poem that's Lessons from Geese that you can check out. Oh, I see another idea, heron wings, perfect. And we use that as outdoor educators a lot anyways. We have like, make a circle using chicken wings, make a circle using the eagle span. So I think it's just a natural progression where we can build in that social distancing in a fun, playful way that also builds in learning. There's a couple other things that talk about whether you can take a look at this, and I'm sure there's some considerations that are missing here, but just best practices from outdoor educators where you're bringing a first aid kit, you have communication with your office, you have a walkie-talkie or a cell phone, you know people are dressed, you know that you have the medications you need, you have the behavior under control, and you have maybe support that you need if you're worried about someone. And I know that has been a concern from some people. They've expressed, you know, Tanya, how could I possibly take a group of students that I don't know and take them outside at the beginning of the year? And I'm not going to say it's possible for all groups. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's going to take some time. But I believe that most groups, just as you can get to know students inside your classroom and get to know their interests and their lived experiences and let the community form, you can do that outside in a beautiful, beautiful way and in a safe way. What are the risks when you're in your schoolyard? Probably the biggest risk is bees in the fall, that wasps, that would be it. So how are you going to manage that? And all the other risks can be mitigated, and you can put things in place that make you feel confident and will make your kids feel confident. Some of the other things sorry, go ahead, Catherine.
There are in the sort of the back end of this slideshow, there is a really great document called Back to Nature, or Into Nature, and it has like templates like for the letter that you might want to send home if your board doesn't have, or your school doesn't have, a walking trip permission form letter, or like a sort of standard expectation of outdoor learning strategies to communicate to parents, like making sure that parents know that you're going to be taking students, and caregivers are you're going to take those kids outside. So there's templates for that. There's checklists. There's all kinds of stuff in that Into Nature guide. The COEO website also has a COVID-19 specific one that is really good resource, and we'll add that into the slideshow for you as well, so that you have access to those sort of hard copy documents for folks that like to have that kind of hard copy. But this is, I mean, for me, like I remember when I started teaching kindergarten, there was a couple of students that I worried about, and I was new to kindergarten, and I didn't feel comfortable with students that I just really didn't know well enough, especially kids who are maybe have special learning needs. And it took a while for me to figure out how to approach that. I mean, the easy thing is to find two corners of a fence and to have an extra person with you. I mean, if you are in Ontario, you should have a partner, or to start within a more secure space. And then gradually start to release that responsibility, or have one educator take one group of kids in one area and another educator take the other group elsewhere. You don't all have to stay together all at the same time. So those are some of the sort of practical strategies that I took when I was teaching kindergarten to kind of make that transition, that quick transition into outdoor learning. And I also had extra clothes. Practically speaking, I always had extra clothes in my classroom for students who didn't have. By the fifth year, I had a little stash of things that had been left over, and we just, we would wash them and then bring them back, and away we went. So,
and I'm really glad you brought up, just being flexible and adaptable. And someone brought that up in the chat as well. And I think things like what we would naturally do, we would naturally have extra clothing for kids. And at our outdoor education centers, we have boots, we have rain gear. We can equip kids that don't have access to those things, making it more of an equitable experience. But what I think we really have to remember during these times is that that equity piece is really crucial, right? And we might not be able to loan out stuff the way we have before. So what are we going to do to get around that? Maybe it's doing an umbrella walk, right? And you can grab a whole bunch of a class set of umbrellas that can be wiped down and they can be put into a garbage bin on the way inside. Just thinking of creative solutions that you can still create sort of situations and be flexible and create scenarios where it's sound pedagogical experiences for our students, really rich and really beautiful, that we know are good practice, but we might have to be a little creative in terms of how we do them. I love some of the routines people are putting here, reviewing things. They're talking about gardening and signals. Maybe it might be a bird signal to call students back, especially if you're going with the bird theme. I like to use an owl, and we talk about the barred owl and what it sounds like to do the barred owl call. It's a "who cooks for you?" Having students take pictures could be part of a routine, because you're practicing how to document inside, so you're going to practice that outside too. All of those ideas that are coming up are really lovely. One thing that I wanted to suggest as a transition, because I think you mentioned also, Catherine, taking advantage of transition times, and a big part of the kindergarten program in Ontario and others, I'm sure, is that flow of the day. So use those opportunities, those transition times, to take kids outside or keep them outside if they're already out. And when you transition from in to out, maybe coming up with a routine where we often do body scans when I worked with kindergarten students and older students. So at the door, we would do a body scan to say we have to move from outdoor bodies to indoor bodies, or outdoor voices to indoor voices. And we would take our outdoor voice out and fold it up and throw it away as a paper airplane. And sometimes it's the self-regulation technique that if a student needs another body scan, they get to choose that. Do you think you might need a second scan to transition inside? Great. I love all these suggestions. I hope we're going to remember I'm going to capture all the chat and I'm going to send it out. Hopefully, Sam, we can figure out how we can do that, but I'll try to capture the chat, because there's lots of great ideas here, especially you're even thinking about winter, which is fantastic. But I'm going to pass it over to you, Catherine, to do the next bit.
And actually, I think we're going to skip this one, Tanya, just for the sake of time, because we're only 20 minutes from the end. So let's just move. We're going to have to sort of move quickly through the next few slides, I think, to try and give enough time to sort of problem solve at the end.
Sure, let's do this. So we told you about the 3 L's, the learners, the land, and the less is more. The next slide, it was going to be a video, which I really feel like all educators should watch this video before they begin in September. So just take a moment where you have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and watch this message from really the experts in our board that are giving guidance in this video, and that's our students. And they send a message of just, you've got this, and that we're anxious too, and we know you are, and we're going to be able to get through this together. I think this is a really beautiful message. And it also speaks to how we have to reduce our anxiety in order to best be in service to our students. So by taking the learning outside, we can actually accomplish that. If we're more calm, we're going to exude that calmness. So when we say, you know, who am I, who are my learners, and who are we together, it's really crucial that we look at that who am I first. You know, decentering our perspectives that may not be the perspectives of our students coming in. Many of our students are coming in from traumatic experiences, and they might not have a relationship with the outdoors that is the same as ours. Likely they don't. And so how are we going to adjust and pivot? And then how do we view our students? How do we view their families? Is it a positive or is it a deficit lens? How do we integrate their lived experiences and their interests into our planning to define what the learning looks like? Do we co-create that? And I guess that's the who are we together piece. So how are we providing opportunities for choice and collaboration, which actually FDK does beautifully, right? I think everyone could learn how FDK lifts student learning, and they highlight it through pedagogical documentation and through responding to students and where their interests go. So you guys are the masters of that. The next is land, and I think for land, for me, I know that we won't protect what we don't know and have a relationship with, and that reciprocal piece is really, really crucial. One thing that I wanted to identify to kindergarten teachers and all teachers really and educators is that there's a sustainability piece with that I think sometimes we forget when we go outside. So we try to create these beautiful documentation panels, and sometimes that means that we might be harvesting too much stuff and make beautiful artwork. It's really lovely for a bulletin board, but how might we, or I invite you to think about what message we're sending and how can we still do that? And there's rich learning, but we can at the same time teach about sustainably harvesting things outside and what it means to not just take from the land, but give back to. So how are we showing up for our schoolyard, and how is their schoolyard showing up for us, is just a really lovely thing to consider. And we talked about that co-created land acknowledgement. When I worked with kindergartens, we didn't do a full land acknowledgement, but we definitely, at the end of our time outside together, we spoke about what we were grateful for, and they would usually, we worked in a cedar forest, and they would take a small piece of cedar that had already fallen on the ground, they didn't pick it, and they went over to a space that was particularly special to them for that learning time, and they placed it there to say thank you. And that was a routine that if we didn't do and I forgot, they would remind me to do that. And so what might be a practice that you could implement that would really allow students to have that reciprocal relationship with the land? And thinking about ourselves too, our relationship with the land, how have we shown up for the land as well as how has it shown up for us? And then finally, I'm going to be quick, provocations. So it looks like we really need to focus on less is more right now. So find the extraordinary in the ordinary. You know, the sidewalk cracks, the grass in our field, there's magic there. So can you get students to find that magic? Focus on the to-be lists versus the to-do lists, and really invite their curiosity in. And here's a couple of ideas for that I feel like, you know, would be really rich for a long period of time to do. Investigate a math trail or a story walk or a weather walk, surface walks, sketching and storytelling. I'm sure there's so many others there. Sit spots I didn't put, journals I didn't include, but a lot of those ideas are from this book, The Walking Curriculum. So check that out too.
Look what I have.
Yeah. What's that? Do you have it too?
Mine too.
Nice. It's a great book. I wish I thought of this. It's so many great prompts and provocations for walks that are from K to 12.
And even in 100 meters, of your schoolyard, and most schoolyards have 100 meters, you know, what could you actually do in that 100 meters? There's like so many different really great little thinking frames that you could use, just have in your back pocket as you're watching and listening to your students. And you know, as they notice things, you're going to have these little frames ready in your pocket to kind of pull out and be like, oh, and asking lots of questions. It came up in the last session, to really not worry about giving answers, but to really just keep asking more and more questions. I'm going to keep going here. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the next slide we don't have to speak to as much as just there's some suggestions and of materials that you can use. And there's a nice little video there as to how, oh, sorry, I skipped one. This I'm going to leave as you to explore as well, but it's a tool that we use in our board to assess our space and to look at it from an asset-based lens. So what are the assets you do have instead of focusing on what you don't have? And oftentimes schools forget to include their students as one of their biggest assets. So, you know, use this. It's a clickable template. You can use this for your class, division, your school, wherever you're at. Hopefully you can brainstorm some of the provocations that you could set up on your schoolyard. That middle part is for you to take a Google shot of your space, your classroom or your school space, your schoolyard space. And even from that Google image, you might notice things that you didn't notice before.
And someone had asked earlier about the Google Maps. So basically I just did a screenshot. I did a screen capture, Control Alt Print Screen, of my Google Map of my school when it was on my web browser, and I copied and pasted that into my Google slide. And then for me, I actually put in with my school, I put in numbers to represent different sort of prompts or thoughts or provocations or wonderings that we might be able to spark in different places. So for example, we have a track area between two soccer goal posts. So like the idea of a 100-meter field trip between the soccer goal posts, or, you know, looking at orienteering and mapping in the front of the schoolyard, or using it as a jumping off point for a community walk. Yes, and just Cindy, yes, this is all going to be shared with you, so you'll get access to the slideshow. But just in you know, just to kind of come into some of the practicalities that people are sort of thinking about tips, tricks, and materials. Is this you or is this me? I think this is you.
Yeah, I just put this in here. Actually, it came from the junior intermediate session, and I thought it was great. So there was a how to make a sit spot, and that is wipeable, because a lot of people use those as a really crucial core practice, core routine. Some of the materials you might have to buy, and if you notice, it doesn't involve a lot. It's not heavy on the finances. You don't need a whole lot. And I think in kindergarten, sometimes we set up these beautiful provocations inside. And what's lovely about going outside is that the provocation is there always, and it's changing, it's dynamic. Going outside in different seasons at different times of the day, you don't have a lot of setup and takedown and cleaning. So it's a really beautiful way to engage students. And these are some of the ideas. I know this morning, the webinar I was on, they were talking about curiosity kits. And someone on this call, Kim from our board, is creating something very similar. So each student in kindergarten, Kim is, I think, at grade 1. She's creating bins for all of our students so they have individual supplies, and then they could bring those outdoors because it's in a kind of a weatherproof container that can be wiped away. Kim, do you want to speak to that, or maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that in the knowledge building circle?
I think so. I mean, there's a lot here, but you know, and we did have a good conversation about this. There's tons of Pinterest ideas. If you search for sit spots or sit-upons, you're going to come up with like a zillion. And depending on your board's policies, like I'm hearing that some folks are saying no foam, because a lot of camping foam will cut up into about 6, like a bedroll. There was a really interesting one where it was that insulation, that sort of insulated foil material, where it's like kind of foamy on the inside, and then there's like a foil on the outside. You can cut those up and just duct tape the edges. My daughter's Sparks use plastic bags stuffed with newspapers and duct tape. It could be a heavier duty plastic bag that you can stick your materials in. And then if you're going to take sketching materials or, you know, whatever else out, or to collect, if you are harvesting, you can collect them and put them into your heavy duty plastic bag. Like IKEA bags are really great for lots of things. If you have an IKEA dollar store placemats, definitely. You know, just a few other thoughts there. The small pencils, really great for our little ones. but also just, depending on the fine motor, you may not have too much of that happening right now. This was kind of more for the juniors and up, but following the flow of the day. And like, for example, maybe you want to do your outside time at the beginning of the day when they're already dressed. Maybe you do your first outside time then, and then your second one at the end of the day when you're getting them dressed to go home, and you have an hour at the beginning and an hour at the end. Or if it's not, the weather's beautiful, maybe your outdoor after lunch just continues on. So finding natural times where the transition, to reduce the transitions, can be really helpful in structuring your day. And again, really remembering that this to be really student focused, like your students, what are their interests? What are they talking about? Are they building tunnels of mud? Do you want to talk about structures? Like, that kind of natural progression of the inquiries that you're going to do with them.
I'm glad you said that, Catherine, because I can remember a kindergarten group that I really wanted to be on a hill, and I wanted to greet the sun, and I wanted us to get a stick, and I wanted us to point to where the sun came up, and then I wanted to trace the path of the sun and tell them where the sun set. And because the group the year before loved doing that, they craved it. They wanted to do that every single morning. That was their way to greet the day. And so I thought, of course, it would apply to this year's group, and they wanted nothing of it. And so really it's important to not let your motivations impact what you like, force the learning. Really let the kids engage in what they would like to know about. That was not their jam, is following the path of the sun. So,
and now we need to get into some collaboration, because our time is ticking away and it's going to disappear on us. So in the chat, I just linked to a Jamboard. So this might be a new tool for folks. It should be pretty accessible. You shouldn't have to do any weird sign-ins or anything like that. So I'm just going to flip over into that. Now, did it flip? Oh, fantastic. I see people are populating it already.
Yeah, it works.
That's great. You can see it, Tanya?
Totally can. It's great. And hopefully we had this crash the other day because there's too many people in it. We hope the numbers in this webinar, I think, will be manageable.
I think we're good.
Yeah.
So the way this tool works is it's like a sticky board. So over here on the left-hand side, you'll see sticky note. There's an arrow. There's a pen tool. If there's something you really like and you want to add a little heart or circle around it, you can absolutely do that. So what we're going to start with is just rethinking some of the indoor sort of traditional inquiry centers or provocations or prompts that kindergartens are using right now. So let's think about the easel or the art center. Like, what could we do differently by moving that outside? How can we do that differently? So if you can, just click on that little, I'll show you that sticky note. You can add a sticky note. And then it'll just pop in, and then you just have to move them so because they kind of all land on the same spot. But yeah, definitely chalk on the pavement, painting with water.
I'm also writing in the chat, just in case you have trouble with navigating or getting onto the Jamboard, or you're on your phone and you can't manage that. I'm writing in the chat some of the categories, and feel free, if you have trouble with the Jamboard, you can put some of your thoughts in the chat as well, just as an alternative. Does that sound good?
Absolutely. And if you've got something here and you want to move on, I'm just going to move forward so you can see there's some ideas where we can share seating options like we just did, outdoor travel and staying socially distanced. Tanya and I had an interesting conversation about the rope, dun dun dun, and how one of my colleagues who's teaching kindergarten for the first time, who swore up and down she would never put her kids on a rope, has realized maybe this year for social distancing that might actually be a strategy that for her students might work. It may not be necessary for others, like if you feel like your students don't need it, but she thought that might be something she would.
Can you guys see this? So I made this the other day. We use ropes all the time in outdoor education, and I just marked off every 2 meters with some duct tape or with some Gorilla tape. So I don't know if this would work for you, but there's lots of ideas out there. Maybe you could cut a piece of rope that is 2 meters to use. You could do symmetry patterns outside for math. You could use them as sorting different based on different categories of natural materials that you find. 5-minute warning from Sam.
I know.
Okay, guys.
Okay, we're trying, Sam. We're trying.
Please
so anyway,
love us, Sam.
So there's a few, and this link will stay live. So once you've logged in, you can continue to add, or build on what other folks have added into our little sticky brainstorming area here. Because this is, the idea of knowledge building. More ideas sometimes is good. Diversity of ideas. Paint and long rolls of paper posted to the fence. Why not? Why not? I actually just picked up, I think, about 10 rolls of white wrapping paper, which I thought would be, even for my grade 7s, a really great way. I could cut it up, I could keep it together, but having bigger pieces to work with, absolutely. Patterns with leaves, sticks, stones, and then leaving them be. Loose parts outdoors.
Sam, it's okay. You don't have to feel badly. It's a good problem to have when there's so many ideas here.
Yeah. Mud painting.
Yeah.
After a rainy day, mixing up potions and concoctions of different textured mud to paint in different places. Why not? They could have their own couple of cups and away they go, making up their own paints.
Shower curtain on the fence. Nice.
I'm doing the bucket, going into seating. I'm doing the buckets with lids actually for my intermediates. So definitely, and they're wipeable, which makes it nice for sure.
Yeah, there were some people that thought they liked that idea of having the buckets because they're pretty sturdy and they're wipeable and you can hold stuff in them, and they were trying to figure out how they would manage it when they brought them back inside. So just recognizing that maybe that would work for also an educator's seat, right? Maybe it would work for your whole class, and if you're willing to wipe them down at the end of the day, you could stack them and get them ready for the next day. Just trying to, based on your space that's available, I don't know if people have room to put those, but that idea of making your own sit spot for seating, using natural seating that's already there. There's a woman who created curiosity kits, and had a large tarp, and we still have the opportunity to create provocations where there is small group learning. So there could be a tarp for a space for a small group of students that can actually socially distance and explore something on that tarp, maybe with field guides, or make your own bird binoculars to check out what birds are on your property. We are really running out of time.
I know.
How do we want to handle this? Because 2 minutes, Sam says. I have 3 minutes on my clock. But yes, we have very short period of time. And I think we should just, Catherine, we can leave this open, but it would be really valuable if anybody here in the chat wanted to unmute. And if they think they have something that would be rich for the group to weigh in on, and that you just want the power of the group, the knowledge of the group, is there anything that we've brought up that you think, but I don't know how to do that, and I need this group to help me? Feel free to be brave and unmute, and we can spend the next couple of minutes maybe dialoguing about that idea.
So Jackie, I think for the slideshow, it'll be shared to you by email, okay? And I've tried to make everything as clickable as possible. So the links are there, they're live links, so you should be able to get into them from there. And if they're not working, please email LSF or email me. My email's there, and I will do my best to fix that. I personally don't mind if this is shared with your team. If you're taking that leadership step and you want to share it with your team, I'm okay with that. Are you okay with that, Tanya?
I sure am. Sharing is caring.
For sure. And like, if there's anything else, like, we've got another minute or so, throw that idea out there.
Can you hear me? It's Carolyn Neal. Okay, my rural connection is terrible. We were just talking this morning. I don't actually know. We were thinking, we could have some students outside because we have a door right to the outside, and some students could be inside. So we're separating the group a bit. But can an ECE be outside with the students by themselves, or for some reason I feel like I was told no. I forget. It's been a few years since I did kindergarten.
So for sure, yes. And I think the messaging is that, but it shouldn't be interpreted that the whole kindergarten class could be divided into two cohorts. It's crucial that you have both members that are delivering a program, because that's how it was designed for us in Ontario, at least. I should say this is Ontario, but that that there is a lot of great practice happening where there's a flow in and out, and there's one educator outside on the team and one educator inside, and that's how they're actually figuring out their cubbies. So every other cubby, so half the group is actually a cohort in the class, unofficially a cohort, but they're still mixing, but an entry cohort, so that they're doing every other cubby. The other group is going to be outside, and then they'll switch.
And I think it's really important. Sorry, Carolyn. I think it's really important to play with your strengths too, as with your partner, with your partner on your ECE team. I think it's really important. Like, some of them are really strong outdoor. Like, part of ECE training is outdoor learning and facilitating that. So there's a lot of expertise there. Like, that's where I learned a lot of what I learned was from my amazing ECE partner. So
Great.
Yeah. Excellent. I've worked with my friend before as well, so this is going to be excellent. And actually, exactly what Tanya, what you said was what we had shared this morning. It's kind of what we were thinking about. Well, the other kindergarten teacher and myself spoke today. So these are the ideas. We were just, more space. We can distance the children more.
Yeah, so play to your strengths. The flip grid is here on the, so when you get it.
And then they switch, the whole cubby idea, right?
Sorry guys,
Yeah, excellent.
I gotta cut everyone off and be the bad guy, sorry.
So send us your questions, and if you're still stressing or worrying about something, that's why we're sharing it with you, because we don't want you to feel that way. So send me an email, send Tanya an email, and we will do our best to help you problem solve so that you're not feeling nervous about this. Like, I honestly feel like kindergarten educators are well positioned for this new
how do we go back to the Jamboard?
Oh, the Jamboard. Are you on it?
What I will do, everybody, I know we have to go. I'm going to copy the entire chat, and I'm going to save the chat. And we will, hopefully Sam will be able to figure out how to attach that when we email everybody the deck. We'll attach
totally
a little bit of the chat too, because there's little golden nuggets in there. And I know that we didn't get to this, but I think it's important to say that LSF has a ton of amazing resources that they have created. And lovely Catherine has actually pulled ones that she found. Those 6 resources you see on the screen right now are pulled from the resources for rethinking, specifically with you in mind. Kindergarten, beginning of the year, entry points. She sifted through like thousands of resources to find those for you so that you didn't have to do that. And so check those out. They're really great entry points. And then there's the Step Outside guide. There's all of your inside out kind of materials that you created during COVID times in the spring that are so brilliant to all age groups, but there's some specific to kindergarten and K-3. So it's been a pleasure. I know we have to go, Sam. I'm really sorry that we're going over time. I really appreciate this group. It was lovely to, well, it's not lovely because I can't see you in person. I'm talking to a brick wall, but I wish we could be in person outside somewhere. We will one day soon. Best of luck. I think that you are being tasked with the impossible. And all you need to know is that message from that video says, the kids say, you just need to care. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to do things perfectly. Please just care and understand, and we'll figure this out together. And I think that's great advice from the kids.